Hello, Bittersweet. This week I'm digging deep into the very essence of what animates me, and also the reason why I write this newsletter every week. For whatever reason, I've always been drawn more to what unites people than what separates them. I believe with all my soul that what we have in common as humans is far greater than what makes us different. Sadly, we live in a world where our attention for difference is being rewarded, trolled, and amplified every second of the day. And this has led us to a very divisive and unproductive public discourse. I come back again and again to the binary nature of our cultural tendencies. We're always asked to pick between two distinct choices or options. It serves, perhaps, the incentives and motivations of media. The one-liners of pithy commentaries, the effectiveness of attacks, the clickbait headlines and quotes taken out of context, all contribute to the goal of placing someone else in a negative light. But it doesn't depict the essence of our reality, since that is always more complex, nuanced, and multi-layered than something that could be characterized by an A or a B. It's like we live our entire lives inside a multiple choice game with only two possible answers, and we always have to pick one of them. I don't know about you, but I struggle even picking one of 5 answers in a typical multiple choice questionnaire, since I never really feel any choice fully captures the answer to a complex question. And I keep looking for inspiration and ideas that can help me think more deeply about the rich nuances of life. And this week is a good week in that regard. Susan Cain released her new book, Bittersweet. Below, I have posted some links to Susan's great work, her books, and her talks. But for now, let me just tell you why this is a helpful example of how we can re-examine, reevaluate, and reframe our relationship to the beauty and richness of something holistically rather than atomistically. You see, I believe part of the root cause of our binary inclination is our Newtonian, Tayloristic, and mechanistic worldview. We have been programmed to see the world in separate parts more often than as a holistic system. Obviously, and that is perhaps a point in and of itself, this was effective and efficient as far as production is concerned. This led to industrialization, globalization, free trade, and an enormous amount of progress that undeniably has been good for the world in more ways than it has been bad. At least, that is my deep conviction. However, much thanks to all this progress, most of our institutions in society are now going through a period of course correction in this sense. We're all trying to adjust to a post-industrial world where understanding the interconnected nature of lives and the way all of our moving parts relate and inform each other is at least as important as knowing the parts themselves. I'll give you 3 examples. First, in business and capitalism. As you know, I've had a front row seat to the gradual and necessary expansion of the definition of interests of the stakeholders of corporations. We're seeing daily examples on how companies are making adjustments to their position, their purpose, and making broad acknowledgements that profit is not only about efficiency and scale, but also about purpose, meaning, and mission. I find that hopeful and encouraging. Second, in education, we atomized subjects and the mastery of knowledge so far that education was more about preparing for a test than preparing for a life. We are now witnessing education pivoting towards interdisciplinary thinking and less rote learning, and more project-based and collaboration-focused curriculum. With broader technologies, education will hopefully continue to be more available, accessible, and hopefully soon less expensive. And third, healthcare. We have, thanks to specialization and technology, made huge progress against most of the diseases, not all, that used to kill people. And we now have a situation where our lifestyles are the most significant single contribution or contributor toward mortality in most of the world. But yet, only 3% of our healthcare expenditures, which are astronomical, go towards avoiding some of the 97% of costs and most of the suffering that could be prevented. That has to change soon. I would argue that other than our political and democratic institutions, healthcare has the most work to do in order to realize the massive opportunities that exist to improve health outcomes at much lower costs. I can go on, but I hope you get the picture. We have started to piece back together our fragmented world. We live in a time of disequilibrium. Our current systems were designed for a time that has long gone by. And the frustrations and tensions that affect us all in this transition are a result of the uncomfortable journey from what we know to what we don't. So coming back to Susan's new book and why it's so profound. First, let me say what a gift Susan's work is to all of us. She picks topics central to the human condition and spends years researching the topic. And so far has found ways to reposition our relationship with attitudes to ourselves and others that brings new meaning, richness, and texture to our lived experience. Her first book was about the power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking. It elevated and upgraded the quality and value of quiet, of reflection, of pausing. And it all reminded us that it is in the silence between musical notes that actually makes music beautiful. Her new book, which came out this past week, is about how sorrow and longing make us whole, how it is the unresolved quality of music in minor or the melancholic undertones in the arts that draws us in and shows us how to respond to pain. She says, quote, "What I have learned is that this bittersweet tradition, it's been with us for centuries. And what it teaches us is that we are creatures who are born to transform pain into beauty." End of quote. I found her relationship to music particularly powerful. I am personally drawn much more to minor than major. I love sad songs, I guess. Not because they're sad, but precisely because they are so nakedly truthful and hopeful at the same time. I mean, singing in sadness is both happy and sad at the same time, isn't it? And I'm not alone. In her research, she discovered that people play their happy songs on their playlists 175 times on average, but they play their sad songs 800 times. I found that both interesting and encouraging. There is clearly something attractive about the unresolved and longing aspects of this kind of music. As we transition to the new world, we would all be better off if we embraced the bitter fully, as neither a permanent or impossible condition, but rather the inevitable companion to being alive. It is this deep longing we all have for what is beyond our reach that is our spiritual fuel in life. Without it, we stop moving, we stop trying, we stop progressing and growing. The C.S. Lewis quote in Susan's book says it all. The inconsolable longing for what we know not what. We have this deep tendency and habit to pick one or the other. I'm either bitter or I am sweet. By picking ends of spectrums, we make the world less rich and less beautiful, and ultimately ourselves less true. In music, in tastes, in attitudes, We would be better off using the rich available smorgasbord of choices that indeed are at our disposal if we just looked beyond the binary choices we are served. I quote a few resources if you want to dig in deeper to Susan's website, her terrific interview and podcast with Tom Harris on Bittersweet. I highly recommend it. And Susan's own TED Talks about introverts, and also about the more recent one on melancholy and the beauty of longing. And I also linked to Susan's playlists of sad songs, which I loved. And then lastly, and maybe unsurprisingly to some of you, I found that David Brooks' latest column did a great job laying out what type of transition we are living through, and also why it's quite challenging. And I recognize that the world is going through a very rough stretch, and that we all struggle with finding any silver lining, meaning, or perhaps even hope in the current conflict. But at least we are not alone in our longing for peace. All people before us shared similar fears and concerns. And when I listened to Susan's playlist, I could feel generational expressions of longing for a better tomorrow while they lived through an often troubled today. So here's to longing, to belonging, and to peace. Have a great week.